You realize that we have begun a brand new year called 2023. And like a blanket of fresh snow, it has covered all those things from 2022. And we can start anew today if we really want to. Good morning. I'm Pastor Ernie Lewis of the Blue Point Church in Sisney, Illinois, with your thoughts for Monday. You know, there are many passages in Scripture where a person found that their past was, let's say, less than desirable, okay? And God gave them a second chance to try to live for Him. One person's story involves a mighty king whom God anointed over his brothers, which they assumed that they would be the better choice. But God knew his heart. The Bible even says that God described him as a man after God's own heart. And at a very early age, David came on the scene and slew the giant Goliath of Gath. He said this was to show that there was a God in Israel, and he would overcome the enemy through this teenage boy and his sling and his stone. But whenever David became king, his ego got the best of him, and he forgot God. One day he lingered as he saw a woman bathing on her rooftop, and he called for her to come to the palace, where there he committed adultery with, it seems, no regard for God's law. Even after his sin of adultery, he tried to hide his sin by calling her husband home from battle, where he was a faithful soldier in the army, and that didn't work. So he finally had him killed in the front of the battle. Now, when all of this came to fruition, God's prophet Nathan came and pointed out his sin and spoke of God's judgment for David. So knowing he needed a fresh start, he first of all confessed his sin before God. And this is written in Psalm 51, where David said, "I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. For against you, and you only, have I sinned and done this evil in your sight, so that you may be blameless when you judge me." Notice David owned his sin. He recognized it, and of course he confessed it before God. The first requirement to starting over, I think, in 2023 is confessing all those failures that were in our past. Maybe we've not been obedient to God's calling, or maybe not following His directions for our life. Perhaps there is even that nagging sin that we cannot seem to overcome, and it troubles us on a daily basis. Well, after David confessed his sin before God, he asked for that inner cleansing. His words were, "Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow." That is certainly what we're looking for, right? That's what we need in this new year, a cleansing of our ways, of our conscience, of our actions, and especially our rebellions against the holy God who knows our heart and everything about us, for that matter. After David begged for God's forgiveness and for an inner cleansing, his next request was very simple. "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." You know, David needed to overcome all the guilt and all the stain that had been in that hardened heart before. So he asked for a new one. And you know, we know today that God is in the business of recreating and renewing a person's heart and their life. And finally, he asked God to restore to me the joy of your salvation and uphold me with your generous spirit. David knew he was talking to. He knew that God was in the business of renewal and cleansing. He knew that it was only through God that he could get back that joy that he once had of serving the Lord. And if you need that today, if you need that in 2023, let's come before the Lord. Ask Him to forgive our sin, and certainly ask Him for that clean heart, that new joy that we can serve Him better.